Hey and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm diving headfirst into a Grimdark project using two awesome miniatures from Cerberus Studios. This time I'm going full experiment mode. No oil washes, no weathering powders. I'm just going to use Villainy Ink enamel washes to try and capture that gritty, corrupted Grimdark look. This is very much a journey for me. I've still got loads to learn about the Grimdark style, but I'm really enjoying filming the models that I paint, learning what I can as I'm going, and hopefully my mistakes will help you learn something too. So let's dive into the models. So I started out with the Warrior. Just going to give you a base coat breakdown if you wanted to try something similar. For the skin, I used Deck Tan, really pale and desaturated to fit into that Grimdark vibe. The armour and the sword, I used dark gunmetal. This gives a muted, worn metal look. For the leather bits, like the belt, gloves and boots, I used Rhinox Hide. For the actual leather straps, I used dark flesh tone for a bit of warmth without breaking that palette. For the trousers, I mixed Parasite Brown with a bit of Deck Tan just to give it a faded, sandy look. For the under armour cloth, I used turquoise just to give it that bit of splash of colour, just so it's not all dead muted tones. For the second bit of cloth that pokes out along the bottom, I went back to Deck Tan. And for the sword handle and the edging, I used Tinny Tin to give it that brassy dark finish. The idea here was to keep everything looking functional, grounded and just a bit tired. Nothing shiny, nothing clean. For the demon, I wanted the skin to feel off, diseased, corrupted, kind of unnatural, but still with a hint of life. I loaded up my wet palette with Pink Horror, Screamer Pink, Baraknor Burgundy, Thousand Suns Blue and Orruk Flesh, and just started mixing on the model. I didn't plan where each of the colours would go. The goal was texture and tonal variation. Something that looks like it might still be alive or recently dead. Then I used Deck Tan and that went on all the horns, teeth and claws to contrast that fleshy tone. Once the base coats were dry, it was time to grimdark this guy up using only Villainy Inks, no oils this time. First up was Goons Grime. I used this all over the model and the base to unify everything. And then I went back in with the reductive method once it had dried off a bit, just wiping it off the raised areas to keep the depth in the recesses. Next up, I used Sector Rust, and I found this more of a technical wash than just a colour wash. I laid it on the armour, and it gives it a corroded, weather-beaten look. And I did this over a couple of layers in hope that it would give me more depth to it. Next, I used Dystopian Brown. And I use that all on the base, in between all the little cobblestones that are on the base, and then up onto the legs, just to simulate the environment this miniature lives in. And then I went back in with the reductive method and feathered it up the legs and also off some of the centre points on the base, just to give that natural transition. Then I spotted some Goons Grime drying, and it was quite thick on the palette. So I thought it's the perfect chance to try something new. And I put that along the bottom part of the tunic to act as a bit more of a thicker, chunkier dirt. And then again used the reductive method and feathered it up just to give a nice transition. Colia Green was used next across the brass handle of the sword. I was trying to give it a verdigris effect. I did about 3 thin coats. I'm not sure if it was the best use of this colour, but it was worth a go, as I'm trying these products out for the first time and seeing what works best for what. Then I went in with some Carrion Crimson, and I applied this over a couple of coats on the face, just to add a bit of warmth, some minor irritation, and just make the face look a bit more alive. The final Villainy ink I used on this was Ichor the Damned, and I used this to outline the stones on the base, and also to add a bit more of sort of a darker dirt to the bottom of the tunic. Once all the wash is dried, I went back in with a bit of Vallejo silver just to add some chippings to the armour and the sword. Then for the final detail, I added some hair, just a bit of cotton bud teased out and glued down. I just think it gives that model an extra bit of character. And with that was the warrior done. Now let's move on to the demon. To start off, I used Goons Grime again. This was my unifying layer across all the multi-skin tones. Then the reductive method helped tie everything together while keeping the variation visible across the skin. Then I used Decay of Death. This was focused around the joints, the neck, the base of the horn. It gave the transitions a sickly, greeny tone to them when it dried. One of my favourite Villainy inks is Carrion Crimson, and I laid this about 3 to 4 times around the mouth, the hands and the chest for that bloody infective feel. It sort of gives you the base of gore to work from. And I feathered it in with a cotton bud, and this just gave it a more natural transition. Next up was Ichor the Damned, and I used this on the tips of the horns, the claws and all the recesses on the base. And while it was still wet, I went in with my cotton bud and feathered it back across again, just to get a nice transition to avoid any sort of harsh lines. Then the final one for this model was Dystopian Brown, and basically I went over the whole base and up the legs again to make the model feel like it's in the environment. This time I used an old paintbrush for the reductive method across the base, giving it a more random, earthly feel to it. But even with all that, it felt like the model was missing something. So I got some faux fur, which I picked up off eBay, pulled it apart, cut it down and glued it with some Mod Podge, trimmed it with some scissors, and I basically ended up with a demon fur loincloth. It turned out way better than I expected and gave this model a more of a wild, savage feel. So there's both models finished, and I've got to say, Villainy Inks are awesome. They're incredibly versatile, and I'm only just scratching the surface on what they can do. This was my first attempt at doing a full grimdark looks without oils or effect paints, and I'm really pleased at the way they turned out. So by combining everything with the oils and the effect paints, they can look even better. I've still got loads to learn about the grimdark style, but the whole process, filming, experimenting, painting, has been an absolute blast. I'm hoping that as I share what I try, you'll pick up ideas too, and maybe even throw some tips back at me in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoy this, hit the like button and consider subscribing. And drop a comment below what your favourite grimdark technique is, or anything you think I should try next. Until next time, keep painting, keep experimenting, and keep it grim.